Welcome to my channel, where unsolved mysteries make you stop and think. Today, we'll explore a strange case in a mysterious Beijing neighborhood where sound itself is forbidden, a silent death with no trace, and an unbelievable investigation. Can you solve the truth before all sounds vanish? Follow this channel so you don't miss a single clue. One early morning, as the sun barely peeked over the horizon, the U10 residential area in Beijing remained wrapped in its signature silence. Despite being crowded, there was never any noise. Residents of this apartment complex never heard the sounds of cars, conversations, or even footsteps in the hallway. It was as if every sound was swallowed by an invisible force, creating an eerily quiet atmosphere. Today was no different. Everything was as calm as usual until a delivery man arrived to drop off a package. At apartment number 36, after ringing the doorbell with no response, he tried calling, but no one answered. Peeking through the door gap, the delivery man suddenly froze, hesitating to go further. A sense of unease welled up inside him. After a moment, he gently pushed the door open and stepped inside. Dim light filtered through the window, revealing the lifeless body of Jason Zhu, a successful businessman, lying motionless on a luxurious sofa. His eyes were wide open, seemingly fixed on an invisible point with a look of confusion. His nose, mouth, and hands showed no signs of struggle. Strangely, there were no bruises, stab wounds, or any marks of an attack. Only a thin trickle of blood dripped from the corner of his mouth onto the carpet. But even that was minimal. This haunting image, combined with the overwhelming silence, made the delivery man feel that something was terribly wrong, something beyond the ordinary. When the police arrived, there were no signs of forced entry, nothing was out of place, and no evidence of violence. Surveillance cameras captured every visual detail, but failed to record a single sound. From Jason Zhu's apartment at that time, everything seemed suspiciously calm. Investigators searched for traces of an intruder, but found nothing unusual. The eerie silence remained unbroken. The only clue was the victim's mobile phone, showing a missed call from an unknown number. Aside from that, Jason Zhu's recent conversations showed nothing alarming, no threats, no conflicts, no signs of worry. This case grew more mysterious by the minute. Jason Zhu's death became an unsolvable question. Why did no one hear anything? How could he die without any clear cause? The investigation team was left utterly baffled. No leads, no solid evidence to follow. All they had was a lifeless body in absolute silence and a growing list of unanswered questions. The autopsy results left the investigation team even more puzzled. Jason Zhu had died from suffocation, yet strangely, there were no signs of physical assault on his body. The police conducted a thorough examination, but found no wounds, no signs of strangulation or stabbing. Even his cardiovascular system and internal organs showed no significant damage. All they had was a lifeless body with no clear cause of death. Medical experts suspected an invisible factor might have been involved, perhaps a toxic gas or an external influence undetectable to the naked eye. These theories were considered by investigators, but nothing concrete emerged. Could a chemical substance or toxic gas have infiltrated Jason Zhu's apartment, causing his death without leaving any physical trace? One of the few leads was a mysterious meeting between Jason Zhu and an unknown woman just a day before his death. This woman left no clear traces or contact information in Jason's records. However, an investigator found a hastily scribbled note on the victim's desk that read, "Meet Diana Lin tonight." Yet, upon reviewing the security cameras around the residential area, there was no sign of this woman ever visiting Jason Zhu's apartment. This made the situation even more perplexing, as neighbors confirmed that Jason rarely interacted with anyone and certainly had no known connection with a stranger like her. Further analysis of surveillance footage across the entire complex revealed nothing unusual. Everything appeared normal. No suspicious images, no noteworthy sounds, and nothing out of place during the time leading up to Jason's death. Strangely, the security system failed to capture any sound from his apartment that night. This was highly unusual. No matter how quiet a neighborhood might be, the complete absence of sound recorded by security systems was simply hard to believe. a strange truth began to surface. The U10 residential area, where Jason Zhu lived, was known for its absolute silence. Residents claimed that no sound, not even wind, footsteps, or conversations, could be heard here. Longtime residents insisted this was an eerie characteristic of the place, as if some invisible force was controlling the silence in this space. Could this silence itself be part of the case? Was there a sound or signal hidden from everyone's hearing? The investigation team kept searching for answers to these questions. Yet, the deeper they delved into the case, the more the clues seemed to blur into uncertainty. Jason Zhu's death remained an unsolved mystery. As the investigation dragged on, Detective Leon Han, the team's captain, decided to re-examine every detail related to Jason. One crucial point he uncovered was a severe traffic accident involving Jason from 5 years ago. This wasn't just any accident, it had lasting consequences. A woman named Diana Lin, who was involved in the crash, lost her ability to speak completely. According to the reports, Jason Zhu had been driving under the influence when he collided with Diana. However, due to lack of solid evidence proving he was intoxicated, the case was closed without charges. Diana Lin, devastated and angry, could not accept the outcome. But everything seemed to fade into silence like a wound that could never heal. Since that incident, Jason Zhu had been receiving anonymous letters filled with hate and threats. The sender never identified themselves, but the letters were packed with venomous words, demanding that Jason take responsibility for what had happened to Diana Lin. Although he appeared confident and unbothered by the threats, investigators later realized Jason had been silently living in fear. For 5 years, he grew more withdrawn, irritable, and anxious. Details few around him noticed. Even more suspicious, a strange phenomenon began to affect the U10 community shortly after the accident. Residents started complaining that they could no longer hear subtle sounds like wind, footsteps, or rustling leaves. They insisted that the area had once been perfectly normal, filled with typical ambient noise. But since the crash, it had become so quiet it defied explanation. Everyday sounds people used to hear had vanished, making it feel like they were living in a void. When police investigated this further, they discovered the silence wasn't limited to a few individuals. It was widespread. Most residents admitted they could no longer hear their surroundings like before. Longtime locals described it as a shift in the very nature of the space, as if an invisible force was suppressing sound itself. This led the investigators to question whether the accident and this unusual silence were somehow connected. Could there be a link between Diana Lin's loss of speech and Jason Zhu's death? Perhaps the woman who had suffered in silence for years had found a way to silence everything else around her. Or perhaps it was just a strange coincidence that the residents had yet to realize. Every question remained unanswered, and the case grew even more complicated. The death of Jason Zhu, along with the bizarre changes in the neighborhood, forced the investigators to rethink every detail. Clues that once seemed unrelated. Was the silence itself part of a much bigger and more hidden plan? With the help of a sound technology expert, Detective Leon Han began exploring a new theory, the possibility of an invisible sound wave affecting people's hearing. The expert, Dr. Ethan Chen, who specialized in ultrasonic and infrasound frequencies, proposed a surprising idea. There might be a device installed somewhere in Yutan that emits sound waves to high or low for the human ear to hear, but powerful enough to affect the body. According to Dr. Chen's research, such waves could impact the nervous system, causing people to lose their ability to perceive sound. Worse, they could slowly reduce oxygen in the body without the person ever noticing. This theory matched exactly what residents of Yutan had been experiencing. The strange silence could be the result of a hidden device disrupting their sense of hearing. Even more concerning, if used improperly, such sound waves could cause serious health problems, even death. If a device like that had been activated inside Jason Zhu's apartment, it could explain his mysterious death. Following this new lead, Leon Han ordered the investigation team to search Jason's apartment again, especially in areas they hadn't checked before. After a thorough sweep, they made a shocking discovery. Hidden deep within the apartment's air vent, covered in a thick layer of dust, was a small but highly complex device. This wasn't an ordinary household object. It had a unique structure filled with circuits and transmission components. Police technicians quickly identified it as a high-frequency sound emitter, a device capable of generating ultrasonic waves that humans cannot hear, but which could have dangerous physical effects. The discovery triggered a wave of new questions. Who installed this device in Jason Zhu's home? Why? Was he the target? Such a device, if misused, could be lethal. But who had the motive to use it? Was it Diana Lin, the woman whose life had been shattered years ago? Or could it be someone else, someone from Jason's past, finally seeking justice for something he had long buried? Investigators couldn't help but suspect that the unresolved car accident where Jason Zhu escaped charges due to lack of evidence was the key to unlocking the truth behind this case. Diana Lin, the woman who lost her ability to speak after the crash, may have been consumed by pain and injustice for years. However, the investigation team also didn't rule out the possibility that someone else in Jason's life had a deeper motive for using such a device in an elaborate scheme. The case was now more complex than ever. A strange device, a mysterious death, and a long list of unanswered questions. Who created this invisible sound? And was silence truly a weapon more dangerous than any visible force? Leon Han and his team pushed forward, determined to find one final clue that could explain everything. As they dug deeper, they finally came across a critical witness, a woman living near Jason Zhu's apartment. She reported that on the night of his death, she saw a woman leaving his unit. More shockingly, she identified that woman as Diana Lin, the one thought to have disappeared after the car crash. 5 years earlier, Diana's presence at the scene reignited suspicions the team had carried for weeks. She was officially brought in for questioning. At the interrogation room, despite years of silence and emotional pain, Diana Lin could no longer hide the truth. She sat across from the investigators and seemed ready to face what she had done. She confessed to developing a special kind of soundwave, one capable of completely shutting down a person's ability to hear when emitted at a certain frequency. This wave would make the victim unable to perceive any sound at all, while slowly depriving them of oxygen. This was why Jason Zhu's apartment remained dead silent that night, and why his body showed no physical signs of attack. But when Leon Han pressed her further, the team was stunned by the true motive behind her actions. Diana Lin hadn't acted only out of revenge for the accident that robbed her of speech. She had also been carrying a deep, unresolved pain for years. After the crash, she faced isolation and struggled to communicate, feeling abandoned and mistreated by the world. Still, that pain wasn't the only force that drove her to act. She admitted that even though she could no longer speak, her heart was filled with anger and resentment toward Jason Zhu, the man she believed had never taken responsibility for what he had done. And when Diana Lin realized she could create a sound wave that rendered others unable to hear anything, that was when she decided to carry out her plan for revenge. She explained that it had taken her years of research to design and build the soundwave device. After discovering that Jason Zhu lived in a uniquely quiet neighborhood, she saw it as the perfect opportunity to execute her plan. With help from a few unidentified accomplices, Diana managed to install the sound emitter inside Jason's apartment without leaving a trace. When Jason Zhu returned home, she activated the device. He couldn't hear anything, and slowly, his body was deprived of oxygen. That total silence was her weapon. Jason's death, though without any signs of physical violence, became an unavoidable consequence. Throughout the interrogation, Diana Lin couldn't hide her remorse. Yet in her eyes, it was something she had to do, the only way to silence the nightmares that had haunted her for years. She admitted that even after her revenge, she still felt hollow. A part of her couldn't forgive herself. Although the act had given her some sense of justice, spiritually, it didn't bring her peace. Her story, a woman who had endured years of voiceless pain, shed light on the connection between the traffic accident and Jason Zhu's death. But one question remained. Was she the only one responsible for the creation and use of that device, or was someone else involved behind the scenes? Even if Diana Lin's motives could be partially understood, her actions were still unforgivable. The court sentenced her to life in prison for murder, All she could do now was pay the price for what she had done. Despite the tragedy of her life and the pain she had endured, the death of Jason Zhu could not be erased. The suffering she caused for him and for his family was irreversible. After the trial, Diana Lin was sent to prison, where she would live out the rest of her days with guilt and regret. But then, something strange happened in the Yutan neighborhood. Unlike the eerie silence that had gripped the area for so long, residents began to notice a shift. Sounds they hadn't heard in months or even years returned. The wind through the trees, footsteps on pavement, whispers in the distance. It was as if the entire neighborhood had been released from a silent curse. However, the return of those faint, familiar sounds couldn't erase the trauma that Jason Zhu's mysterious death had left in the minds of Yutan residents. Even though they could now hear the sounds they had once been deprived of, the long silence had already imprinted itself deep into their consciousness. Jason Zhu's death remained an unforgettable shadow. People in the neighborhood couldn't forget the days of unsettling quiet, the strange absence of sound, and the fear they had lived with. In fact, many of them became more anxious than ever. Had the silence truly ended just because Diana Lin had been arrested? Or was there a deeper reason they still couldn't understand? Though the sounds had returned, a sense of unease still lingered, like they were living in a world where the mystery had never truly been solved. And deep down, the same question echoed in everyone's mind. Had this neighborhood truly escaped the shadow of death, or was it merely a pause before something darker emerged from the silence? The story of Jason Zhu and Diana Lin ended in a way no one could have predicted, but the wounds it left behind still remained in the hearts of those who witnessed it. Now that silence had faded and sounds had returned to the air, the people of Yutan were left facing a question with no answer. Was the return of sound truly a sign of freedom, or just a temporary calm before something far more terrifying awakened from the dark?